help them on their journey to understand kind of what the best practices are and how they can better implement some of the tools that they already have today, as well as obviously looking for better tools in the future like logic monitoring.
All right.
And then
but before that, you were a practitioner before that, right?
Yeah, for sure. So previously, I worked with a company called Delego. We did SAP ERP payment integration, so PCI compliance was a big deal. Order to cash processes, understanding what the e-commerce flow needed to look like, and actually kind of understanding that user journey, and of course dealing with all of the requirements of having the payment page. That hosted order page has to be up. It's a very important piece, obviously, to the puzzle in the business.
So you're telling me that there's an actual ROI associated with downtime in a payments processing company?
Yes, absolutely. There's nothing better than receiving the notification or the phone call that you can't process a payment anymore. There's nothing worse. Obviously, we've all been there when we go through a checkout process or we try to get something ordered out and it just doesn't work for us. A lot of people will leave and never come back, and obviously that would be our fault as the payment providers, so we just need it to be up. It was mentioned earlier on, 9999 isn't enough. It's 100%.
Right.
People could be on there at 2 a.m.
Right. All right, awesome. Well, one of the things I love about working with our partners Optum is because so many of you guys are former practitioners, have seen things in the real world in a big way. One of your colleagues I know used to run all of monitoring for BlackBerry back in its heyday, which is massive. But every time I talk to you guys, the stories before Optum were really, really cool for real world examples. And one thing I love about it is that you guys do something called a monitoring maturity assessment. Is that right?
Correct.
Of course, when you put a lens on that from somebody who's a practitioner who's done this in the real world, it can always be a lot more valuable. Can you tell the group a little bit about what that monitoring maturity assessment is, what it entails?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, a lot of times what happens is our customers come to us looking for a new tool. They think that the solution is just to buy something else, add it to the stack. We've all been there. The reality is that when we actually start to have the conversations with the customer, we start to identify that they don't quite understand what the challenges are in a lot of cases, and they don't even know where to begin. So an assessment gives us an opportunity to actually work with the individual teams to start to understand what their processes are, what that means to the overall business and the impact that their day-to-day is going to have on the business, and then actually kind of identifying where they are on that maturity scale, providing some kind of next steps or potential points that they need to focus on to be able to get themselves to that next level. A lot of times that ends up rolling itself into us working with them to build out some of those additional pieces and solutions and ensure that they have that end result that they're targeting. And really that's what we always look for, is the end result. It's not about the piece or the tool, it's about what you're looking to accomplish and how we can get you there in the process itself.
Any interesting findings in some of these assessments?
Yeah, there's a couple. I think one of the biggest ones, and it's been spoken about a whole bunch here, is silos. I work with a lot of different teams across the organization. They're all really highly educated people. They're really good at their jobs, but they focus very much on exactly the things that they care about and that they see day to day. The challenge that you run into there is you're doing a great job of this one specific piece, but if the rest of the organization isn't speaking the same language or they don't quite understand what you're doing, it removes some of that business intelligence level. So you know you're doing a great job, but does your boss's boss know what's going on a day-to-day basis? How do they measure that intelligence, and how do they actually know what a good job is?
One thing I think that exacerbates some of the silo challenges is what we talk a lot about, tool sprawl. I've heard some crazy numbers before.
Yes, it wasn't myself personally, but one of our engineers actually did a review and an assessment with a large financial institution. We asked them how many tools they had. They thought, it's a fair number of tools. The reality was we ended up at about 250 different tools that they were leveraging. In a lot of cases, it was a one-piece functionality they were looking for, one point of data that they needed to get, but they thought the only way they were going to be able to do it is just stack another tool on, another tool on, another tool on. The other thing that we see a lot is that they just don't know, the teams don't get the why of it. They're told to do a specific thing, and they don't understand the overall impact to the business itself. And it's difficult to understand why you're doing certain things. There might be somebody higher up that understands it, but they really need to communicate that down to make sure everybody's kind of moving in the same direction on the enterprise level.
Awesome. Yeah, 250 tools can be a lot to manage, I imagine. So we like to obviously talk a lot about consolidating and do some tool consolidation. It actually winds up being probably one of the top 3 use cases that we're solving on a regular basis, and the efficiency gains out of consolidation and standardization wind up being pretty huge. So it's a big step along the journey to efficient IT operations. So taking a little of a different step in this, I think it'll kind of build towards what we're talking about with data flow. But we heard a lot this morning about what we're really faced with today is the challenges around the data flow through IT operations. And Christina talked about it as the that chain of a pipeline of data going through. So if data is what's fueling the enterprise, how are you guys advising clients in terms of the flow of operations data, IT operations data?
Yeah, so stepping back a little bit, I think a while back there was this kind of idea, or when you talk to the sales guys, of course, the different tools, if you talk to an applications APM tool, they're going to tell you all you need to worry about is the health of the application. That's what's important. As long as the application is working, you're fine. The infrastructure monitoring guys are always going to tell you the only thing that's important is the infrastructure. That's if the infrastructure's up, everything is going to be fine in production. We've already tested it all. It's just got to run the way it's supposed to run. The reality is it's not enough to do either of those. You need both. You need good metrics. You need all of the data about the actual underlying infrastructure, and you need to be able to translate that into real-world metrics that we actually understand. So just being able to say, oh, we got this exception is great if we're just dealing with the developer level, but when you're actually looking at the overall business, we need that translated into actionable intelligence information that can actually be leveraged and worked with by the operators themselves.
So AI ops, is that what you're hinting at?
A little bit of AI ops might be a good idea there, for sure.
Well, so obviously it's a great term to kind of dig into, but when we talk about the supply chain of data, we talk about the supply being massive. So we are talking about massive amounts of data. And so I think kind of our platform, like many other enterprise software platforms, is really about managing that data and turning it into kind of actionable insights. So we know that customers would like to be taking advantage of the promises of AI ops, right? Mm-hmm. But what are some prerequisites that you're advising your customers to really kind of consider before maybe meeting unrealistic expectations?
Make sure I don't cover the mic here, yeah. I think, so first of all, machine learning, AI ops, I'm sure everybody has heard from every sales rep that's come in, they've used the terms, this is the solution, it's going to solve all of the problems. I think the reality is a little bit more granular than that. One of the things that everybody here is probably familiar with is the concept of garbage in, garbage out. It's really important to be able to identify what those KPIs need to be for the various teams, what it means to actually have success, and be able to bring those together and kind of translate that back, I think.
So on that garbage in, garbage out, we talk a lot about this. In fact, actually, I was just talking with our partners, Viom Labs, about this before this breakout too, is that what we're finding a whole lot in enterprise IT ops in terms of managing that data flow is trying to strive for some sort of global standardization, some sort of efficiency gains via a single source of truth. And that can be hard to come by. In fact, I imagine there's probably some ServiceNow CMDB customers in the room, consumers in the room, really any CMDB. It's really rare to find, I think, a CMDB that is exactly architected how we want it to be. In fact, that's why there's so many different consultancies and service providers around optimizing CMDB, but it can be such a powerful aspect of driving IT operations data flow. One thing that we've been doing a lot of with our enterprise customers is really driving that standardization of data at the discovery point, then really driving that single source via bidirectional integration with the CMDB, so that you're not only informing and filling out the CIs in the CMDB, but you're also taking this metadata from those CIs and bringing them right back into the monitoring platform. What this really helps with is data enrichment, because if you can enrich and put context into the alert and incident flow that then goes into your ITOM, your event correlation, or then eventually into your ITSM platform, that means the world for consistent data, and then also being able to do rapid remediation, fuel more efficient automated automation strategy. But then also, we were talking about like putting links into knowledge bases and being able to share resolution information right at the point of capturing those incidents and then fueling that back into the single source of truth. So I think that that's a really, really big promise of having standardized discovery and data consistency, especially for global organizations. And if you can accomplish that with your tools and your platforms, that can really unlock a lot of the promises that we're talking about with AI ops. Speaking to your point about good data in means good outcomes, right?
Yep, exactly that.
Yeah. All right, well, so on that note, Optum customers tend to be very large enterprises.
Yep.
They tend to be across a variety of different industries.
Different verticals for sure.
Fintech, financial services, retail, manufacturing, so on and so forth. All of these industries are making big investments in the latest technologies. But a lot of that comes with complexity. So how are you guys advising your customers on managing the risks that come in those big investments and the complexity that comes with it?
It's a really good question. So I think one of the biggest risks is when you put that much data together, there's going to be a lot of noise. So you need to be very methodical in the way that you're putting the data together to ensure that you're not creating a lot of noise. Even then, you're still not able to do it by yourself, and that kind of ties back to some of the AI ops requirements and being able to get it all put together. There's a level of complexity that is fine when it's a direct monitoring tool that you're running and you're the actual developer, that's fine. But when you actually have to push this data out into another system where others are actually going to ingest the data, it needs to be clearly defined, consumable information that people can actually action. With that, the other thing that you need to take into account, and something that I'm sure we've all probably run into here, just out of curiosity, does anybody have an open rec right now for IT at all in their organization? Just a couple maybe? You're never going to be able to get the number of people you need. They just don't exist. There's not that many people in the world. We're always looking for better solutions. But at the end of the day, I think really what it comes down to is just being able to make sure that you don't have that one guy on your staff that set up all of the systems and understands how it works. And then from there, actually understand that if you lose that guy, you're going to lose all of that relevant and important information effectively.
So you're saying it's not a good idea to have one person with all the keys to the castle?
No, I've had conversations, and one of my favorite conversations recently was someone who discussed the need to understand the tools that they have in their organization. They had a big team that had been there for about 5 or 6 years, a great resignation, of course we've all been dealing with that. They lost the entire team. They hired a couple new people, really intelligent people. They have no idea how all of the tools are tied together. They have no idea what kinds of automation are happening in the background. And they're just kind of trying to poke around and understand exactly what's going on. So making sure that when things are implemented, it's not just one person's solution, that they actually clearly identify how the system operates, what the risks are, and who's going to own that, and ensure that anyone that leaves at least gives that information to another candidate or someone that can actually take that up.
So it's not really actually even just a tools conversation. It seems like it's more a culture.
It is. Yeah, it's absolutely a culture situation. I mean, a lot of times there's that really smart guy, and everybody probably has one of them on their team where, we go to that guy for all the scripts, we go to that guy for all of the resolutions. If there's something wrong, you can message him on Slack or Teams if you've been forced to use Teams by your bosses now. But eventually, that person's going to leave, and whether or not you have built a good foundation for people to actually step up and take over is going to be kind of make or break for the business itself.
Awesome. You guys are involved in a lot of these projects, these journeys with the clients. What are, you have one or two that kind of stick out that you're just really excited about?
So as far as excited, I think one of the biggest ones I'm excited about right now is one that we're actually going into a POV phase very soon with. A very large bank. They are very process deep, we will say. I've been working with various ARB candidates and a few other pieces of the organization just to get the approvals that we need to get that initial collector deployed. It's been quite the process. With that though, the reason I'm really excited is throughout that process, they identified that they had 19 different outages in the last month alone.
You said this is a large bank
Yep.
with 19 outages in the last month alone.
This is actually something that I'm hearing a lot more than you would think, to be honest with you, in a lot of cases. That can be a key critical service. It could be an application. Nothing worse than trying to log onto your banking app and not being able to see your money. I know who I would be calling right away, and I would not be very happy about it. One of the bigger challenges that really stood out to me was just the lack of visibility to some of these outages, though. Something that really scared me, to be honest with you, was the words, one of our customers notified us that we had an application issue. So that is someone calling into customer service, and that is the first report in the entirety of the organization to say, hey, there's a problem. That's not right. That needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, actually, right before the session started, I was talking with our friends over at LSU, and we were talking about being able to have better Selenium checks, better website checks, and then being able to, because when your customers are the ones informing you of outages,
It's not a good feeling.
Yeah, but then I can't help but start thinking about that song we just heard about the blame game. I'm not going to be able to get those songs out of my head, to be honest with you.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Are you
did a great
practicing for your next calls? Are they going to be in song and dance form?
I wasn't sure. Do we have to do the dance?
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
or-
seriously. I brought some tap shoes for you.
There you go. That's about as good as you're going to get from me right now.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, so rounding out, obviously, we're talking about some of the macro conditions that have really had a big impact. You mentioned about kind of the Great Resignation. You mentioned about the single source. I think CIOs and VPs and IT leadership are really being relied upon more and more today to help kind of keep the lights on and navigating in this digital world through macro conditions that we can't really control.
Yep.
We're talking about global supply chain issues. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about macro or
Great
swings in the macro
resignation.
markets, great resignation, whatnot. So, from your perspective as consultants, how are you guys advising the IT leaders that are being relied upon more and more and more to navigate through these uncertain waters?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier on, no matter how many people you hire on your team, you're never going to be able to do it all just manually. You can't react to every small P1 issue. You need to start to look at identifying smart work, things that you can do to intelligently fix a problem and not have to come back to it later on. So for example, low-hanging fruit about automation. We hear this word automation and everybody's usually terrified, I don't want to automate 1,000 mistakes because if you do it once, you do it wrong, that's it. If you do it once wrong with the automation, it can be a bigger issue, right? The reality though is we need that automation, we need intelligent work, and we need to be able to take our intelligent people that are on the team and focus them on the real problems that we need to fix in our businesses, as opposed to answering every little, I got an up and down on a disk for 5 minutes or something like that. Those kinds of things, the noise needs to be filtered out. We need a tool, Logic Monitor tool of course is a great option, to be able to filter a lot of the noise out and actually surface what's important to everybody here in the room to actually do their jobs. And do the fun stuff as opposed to nobody wants to resolve that one disk issue, right? We want to go build the new automation.
Yeah. So doing more with less is really kind of the name of the game, right?
Absolutely. It's a requirement moving forward. You want to scale to be a global business and you absolutely need to be able to rely on automation to do it.
Right on. So off the cuff a little bit, but you guys sell or support a couple other different ecosystem solutions. You want to talk just a little bit about how you're kind of pairing observability platforms with a holistic solution?
Am I allowed to use the name?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So we also focus around the InfoBlox suite. So for anyone familiar with the NetMRI NCCM Network Change and Configuration Management tool, or the DDI stack, that would be DNS, DHCP, and IPAM, IP address management. We have the ability to not only deploy those for our global customers, and that's a really huge benefit for them because honestly, when you're dealing with multiple networks, multiple acquisitions and mergers, there are a lot of dynamic pieces to the organization, and being able to just simply drop a new node, new name servers, DHCP servers, whatever we need to do for that new acquisition, and just bring them into the organization, it makes it super easy. Now that is a huge amount of rich data that we have there that we can then tie in and integrate with the context and the information that's tied into the Logic Monitor portal itself. So our own team has actually been working a little bit on the side to start to build out some additional integrations and automations. And one of the things I'm actually looking forward to this year is spending a little bit more time on looking at our NetMRI NCCM solution and being able to trigger potential automatic remediations based around some of the alerts and the issues that we're seeing in the Logic Monitor tools themselves.
Yeah. I think, again, abstracting from the tools, but what you're really kind of getting at is that data is what's flowing through that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a matter of being able to capture and understand what you want to do with it and align that to the outcomes that are desired, right?
Exactly. Standardize it, harmonize it, and make it consumable by people that don't necessarily understand what it means when you talk about latency or IOPS and things like that. It's more important to understand at the higher level the overall business health as opposed to what those individual metrics might be.
Awesome. And just are there any other kind of trends in your actual business and Optum's business that you guys are seeing? Obviously, a lot of our reseller partners, a lot of our solutions provider partners are dealing with long lead times on hardware, and they're dealing with like global supply chains issues that are completely out of their hands. Yep. Are you guys seeing pivots in how solutions providers are becoming a more critical component of these kind of higher level, business level?
Yep. A lot of the solution providers have been kind of put on the first or the front line effectively. If we are a solution provider and our service goes down, then the customers that rely on it to provide their services to their customers are not happy. That it stops business and it causes a whole bunch of issues. I think further to that, there's been a lot of trends around it's a good trend. It's a recognition of a need for more integration. Everybody has all these tools, and they don't usually speak very well together. And going back to those siloed issues, you don't have that central piece, right? So a lot of customers are coming to us and looking to get all of that rich data from System A or System B or System A, B, and C brought together, harmonized, and then put into a central place that they can actually consume it.
Yeah, right on. So the tools can help facilitate that, but it's about aligning it to what the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And I think if you kind of summarize, you know, we talked about clean data, we talked about doing more with less, and we talked about efficiency gains through all that. That's all actual critical components to this journey that we're talking about. But then also the partnership thing comes in as well. The vendor partners, the solutions provider partners, so on and so forth. They kind of tie it all together, right?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time, Jesse. This is a great conversation. I think, you know, on our themes in terms of how we're talking about observability and what it all kind of drives towards in terms of outcomes, how you can leverage that to achieve some AI ops goals. This is the kind of conversation that's really kind of top of mind for our joint customers. And so hopefully you guys got something, nice takeaways out of this conversation and discussion. But thanks so much for joining on this breakout, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Awesome. Thank you all. And thank you, Logic Monitor. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Optum
absolutely.
is really happy to be a part of this, and we really appreciate the time.
Fantastic. Good deal. Awesome.